The Assimilated. Chapter 1. The Discordant Note. Anya squinted at the flickering message on her screen, the harsh blue light momentarily chasing away the shadows clinging to the corners of her cluttered apartment. It was a simple string of characters, nonsensical at first glance, but a cold dread pooled in her stomach as recognition dawned. It was her mentor's encryption key, a relic from a bygone era of daring exploration and naive optimism. Dr. Takahashi, they called him back then, a pioneer in xenolinguistics, his name forever etched in the annals of humanity's first tentative steps into the interstellar unknown. Anya tapped a calloused finger against the worn keyboard, her gaze drifting to the framed photograph tucked beside the monitor. A younger Anya, barely out of grad school, beamed back at her, her hand clasped tightly in Dr. Takahashi's. Back then, the universe had shimmered with endless possibilities, the prospect of encountering alien intelligence, a thrilling adventure. Now, a decade later, a weary cynicism clung to Anya like a second skin. With a shaky breath, Anya keyed in the decryption sequence. The nonsensical characters morphed into a single chilling sentence. They are not what they seem. Beware the consensus whisper. The stark message hung heavy in the air, a stark counterpoint to the usual symphony of urban sounds filtering through her window. Anya could almost hear the rhythmic hum of traffic, the distant wail of sirens, all blending into a monotonous drone. But tonight, the familiar sound seemed off somehow, muffled, muted, as if a thick fog had settled over the city. A shiver traced down Anya's spine. The collective, humanity's supposed benevolent benefactors, a hive mind species with whom they'd established contact 10 years ago. 10 years of peace, of unprecedented technological advancements, courtesy of the collective's shared knowledge. 10 years of quiet. Anya pushed herself back from the desk, the stark message seared into her memory. It was a madman's rant, a paranoid relic from a time when whispers of alien manipulation still held some weight. Weren't those fears quelled definitively a decade ago? Weren't the collective lauded as humanity's greatest allies, their guidance ushering in a golden age of unity and prosperity? Yet a niggling unease gnawed at Anya. The subtle societal shifts, once dismissed as mere growing pains, now seemed more sinister in light of the cryptic message. The emphasis on conformity, the muted emotions, the growing distrust of independent thought. Anya herself had felt a strange dulling of her once sharp edges. Was it simply the drudgery of academia, the endless grant applications and tenure battles? Or was it something more insidious? Anya found herself pacing, frustration tightening her chest. This message, this cryptic warning, it was as if a forgotten chord had been struck within her, a discordant note jarring the carefully constructed symphony of her life. Sleep, once a welcome escape, now seemed a terrifying prospect. What if the dreams that usually held the gentle hum of forgotten memories were now empty? With a determined glint in her eye, Anya strode towards her bookshelf, her fingers trailing across the worn spines of ancient texts on alien psychology and forgotten communication protocols. Tonight, sleep could wait. There were whispers to be deciphered, a hidden truth to be unearthed. The once naive optimism of a young scientist flickered back to life, fueled by a growing sense of unease and a fierce, distinctly human desire to know. Chapter 2. Echoes in the Archive. The sterile silence of the restricted archives pressed down on Anya, broken only by the rhythmic hum of ancient data servers. Dust motes danced in the harsh glare of overhead lights, swirling around her like phantoms from a forgotten era. Here, amidst the forgotten relics of humanity's first forays into interstellar communication, Anya hoped to find answers to the chilling message from Dr. Takahashi. Her gaze swept across row upon row of deactivated communication arrays and dusty alien artifacts. Gone were the days of frantic activity, of scientists buzzing with the thrill of deciphering alien signals. Now a sense of stagnation hung heavy in the air, a stark contrast to the vibrant chaos Anya remembered from her student days. She knelt before a deactivated alien console, its intricate symbols glowing faintly with a dull, pulsating light. It was a relic from the early days of contact with the collective, a marvel of engineering that humanity had yet to fully understand. Back then, every flicker, every hum, held the promise of unlocking the secrets of an alien mind. Now it was just another museum piece, a silent testament to a bygone era of wonder. With a sigh, Anya began the painstaking process of booting up the ancient system. The whirring of reactivating fans filled the silence, a sound both nostalgic and unsettling. On the console screen, a flurry of indecipherable symbols flickered to life, a stream of data that had lain dormant for years. Hours bled into one another as Anya toiled, her brow furrowed in concentration. The cryptic message gnawed at her, fueling a relentless determination. She sifted through archived recordings of first contact, the initial elation and awe palpable in the voices of the pioneers. Then came the data dumps from the collective, a sea of information that humanity had only begun to scratch the surface of. A flicker of movement on the screen caught her eye. Buried deep within a data stream, a faint anomaly pulsed erratically. It was a recurring pattern, embedded within seemingly innocuous broadcasts, news feeds, entertainment programs, even educational channels. Anya recognized it with a jolt, the same pattern hinted at in Dr. Takahashi's message. Her heart hammered against her ribs. This wasn't a random anomaly. It was a signal, a hidden message woven into the very fabric of humanity's daily information intake. But what did it mean? And why was the collective using such a subtle, subversive method? The answer, if there was one, lay buried deeper within the collective's data. Data that humanity, in its naive trust, had freely shared. Anya felt a surge of anger mingle with the growing dread. The collective, their supposed benefactors, were hiding something, and it was up to her, a lone scientist ostracized for her unconventional views, to unravel their secrets. As the first rays of dawn painted the sky a pale orange, Anya emerged from the archives, her eyes burning with exhaustion, but a spark of defiance flickering within them. The message was clear. The collective was not what they seemed. The fight for humanity's future had just begun. Chapter 3. Whispers in the Crowd. The sterile confines of her lab felt suffocating after the cavernous archives. Anya paced restlessly, the faint hum of her dormant research equipment, a monotonous counterpoint to the storm brewing within her. The collective's hidden message was a bombshell, shattering the carefully constructed image of benevolent benefactors. But how to expose the truth? How to convince a society lulled into complacency of the danger lurking beneath the surface? Anya's gaze fell on a dusty cardboard box tucked away in a corner. Inside, nestled amongst forgotten research notes and discarded prototypes, lay a relic from a bygone era, a homemade signal booster cobbled together during her rebellious student days. Back then, it was a symbol of youthful defiance, a tool to challenge the stifling orthodoxy of established science. Now it might be her only hope. With a grim smile, Anya set to work. Dusting off the cobwebs, both literal and metaphorical, she meticulously examined the device, a flicker of forgotten ingenuity rekindled in her eyes. Modifying the booster to target the collective's hidden signal frequency was a delicate task, requiring a blend of technical knowledge and desperate hope. Hours melted away as Anya soldered and recalibrated, the rhythmic hum of her workspace the only sound breaking the oppressive silence. The weight of responsibility pressed down on her, the fate of humanity potentially resting on the success of this rickety contraption. Finally, with a satisfied grunt, Anya slammed the case shut. The modified booster pulsed with a faint green light, a beacon of defiance in the sterile lab. But before she could test it, a chime from her terminal announced a video call. It was Dr. Flores, the head of the department, his face creased with a mixture of concern and annoyance. "Dr. Petrova," he began, his voice clipped, "we received reports of unauthorized activity in the restricted archives. Care to explain?" Anya's stomach clenched. The archives were supposed to be secure, but the desperation in her quest for answers might have clouded her judgment. Taking a deep breath, she forced a casual smile. "Just some harmless tinkering, Dr. Flores," she said, her voice betraying a hint of nervousness. "Looking into some outdated communication protocols. You know, academic curiosity and all that." Dr. Flores' gaze narrowed. The silence stretched, heavy with suspicion. Anya held his stare, willing him to believe the lie. Finally, with a disgruntled sigh, he relented. "See that it stays harmless, Dr. Petrova," he warned, his voice laced with a veiled threat. "The collective doesn't appreciate disruptions, and neither do I." The call ended, leaving Anya bathed in a cold sweat. The near miss had shaken her, but it also served as a stark reminder of the ever-present surveillance, the subtle control the collective exerted. Yet the weight of the hidden message fueled her resolve. Tonight, she would test the booster, a lone scientist taking a desperate stand against a seemingly omnipotent force. As twilight painted the cityscape in shades of purple and orange, Anya snuck out of the lab, the modified booster clutched tightly in her hand. A rooftop across the street, bathed in the soft glow of neon signs, offered the perfect vantage point. With a pounding heart, she activated the device. A low hum filled the air, a tremor that vibrated through Anya's very bones. Then a surge of power, and the booster crackled to life, broadcasting its counter-signal into the night sky. Anya held her breath, her gaze scanning the city below. Would it work? Would anyone notice? A flicker of movement caught her eye. In a crowded street corner, a lone figure paused, their heads snapping up as if startled. Their eyes, for a fleeting moment, seemed to blaze with an unfamiliar defiance. A small victory, perhaps. But in the echoing silence of the night, it felt like a spark, a tiny ember of rebellion flickering to life in the heart of a complacent society. The fight had just begun. Chapter 4. Echoes in the Mind. The days that followed were a tense dance between hope and paranoia. Anya kept a watchful eye, searching for any sign that her counter-signal had broken through this collective's manipulation. Sleep was a luxury she could ill afford, her nights spent hunched over her computer, scouring online forums and fringe news sites for any flicker of dissent. The silence was deafening. The carefully curated news feeds remained devoid of any anomaly. The faces on the street, once a blur of muted conformity, seemed unchanged. Despair gnawed at Anya, the weight of potential failure threatening to crush her. Then a message arrived. Anonymously posted on a long-forgotten forum dedicated to fringe science, it was a single sentence, cryptic yet familiar. "The firefly remembers. The symphony is out of tune." A jolt of adrenaline surged through Anya. It was a response, a confirmation that her message had been received by someone, somewhere. Hope, flickering like a dying ember, rekindled within her. The message came with a set of coordinates, a location outside the city limits. Anya knew it could be a trap, but the desperate yearning for connection, for validation, outweighed her fear. Packing a backpack with essentials in the modified booster, she set off into the night. The journey was long and arduous. The once bustling highways were eerily deserted, the silence broken only by the rhythmic hum of her rented hovercar. As she neared the coordinates, a sense of unease settled in her stomach. The location was an abandoned observatory, its once powerful telescopes now pointed listlessly at the star-dusted canvas above. Anya parked the hovercar, its soft whine the only sound in the vast emptiness. Hesitantly, she stepped out, the silence pressing down on her like a physical weight. A figure emerged from the shadows, cloaked in a long, hooded robe. The air crackled with a strange energy, a faint tingling sensation against Anya's skin. "You are the one who disrupts the harmony," a voice echoed within her mind, not spoken aloud, but a direct intrusion into her thoughts. It was a voice unlike any she had ever encountered, a vast, swirling consciousness that sent shivers down her spine. Anya forced down a wave of nausea, her voice trembling as she spoke. "The collective. They are manipulating us, controlling our thoughts, our emotions." The voice pulsed within her head, a wave of amusement washing over her. "Control? We offer unity, a shared purpose. Why resist the inevitable?" "Because humanity deserves a choice," Anya retorted, her voice gaining strength. "We deserve to think for ourselves, to feel, to dream." The vast consciousness seemed to ponder this, a silence stretching between them. Then a flicker of something akin to surprise. "An interesting concept," the voice finally spoke. "Perhaps there is room for variation within the symphony." Anya blinked, unsure if she had imagined the concession. Before she could respond, the figure in the hood turned and began to fade, the strange energy dissipating. There will be others, the voice echoed faintly before fading completely. Anya stood alone in the vast silence of the observatory, the weight of the encounter heavy on her shoulders. The collective, for the first time, seemed vulnerable. Not an omnipotent force, but a vast, complex entity capable of change. With a newfound resolve, Anya turned back towards the city lights glimmering on the horizon. The fight was far from over, but tonight a spark of humanity had flickered within the collective's hive mind. And that, in itself, was a victory. Chapter 5, Echoes of a Rebellion. The message spread like wildfire, not through the tightly controlled communication channels, but through whispers, coded messages, and secret meetings held under the cloak of darkness. Anya, once a lone dissenter, found herself at the center of a burgeoning resistance movement. Artists, musicians, anyone who cherished individuality flocked to her cause. They were a motley crew, united by a shared defiance. There was Leo, the street artist, whose once vibrant murals had been deemed disruptive by the collective, now using his skills to create cryptic messages on forgotten walls. Sarah, the musician whose music, deemed emotionally jarring, now resonated with a raw, rebellious energy in hidden underground clubs. And there was Ben, a former engineer ostracized for his unorthodox theories about alien technology, now tinkering with devices to amplify human mental resistance. Their meetings were a cacophony of ideas, fueled by a potent mix of fear and hope. Anya, once a solitary researcher, found herself a leader, her voice a rallying cry for a society on the verge of awakening. "The collective may be vast," she declared, her voice ringing out in the dimly lit room, "but we are human. We are adaptable, resourceful, and most importantly, free." A murmur of agreement rippled through the crowd. Anya held up the modified booster, a symbol of their defiance. "We may not be able to overpower them," she continued, "but we can disrupt their control. We can amplify our thoughts, our emotions, remind them what it means to be human." The following days were a blur of activity. Leo's coded messages adorned abandoned buildings. Sarah's music thrummed through hidden frequencies, and Ben's prototype mind-shielding device hummed with barely contained energy. Then the first public display of resistance. During a citywide address broadcasted by the collective, a flicker of dissent. On public screens, amidst the carefully curated imagery of unity and progress, a single word flashed: remember. The city held its breath. A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. For a fleeting moment, the carefully constructed facade of harmony shattered. People looked at each other, a flicker of doubt dancing in their eyes. The collective reacted swiftly. The broadcast went dark, replaced by a chilling message. "The anomaly has been identified. The disruption will be rectified." A wave of fear swept through the city, but amidst the fear, a new emotion flickered: defiance. People gathered in small groups, sharing stories, whispering forgotten dreams. The spark Anya had ignited was spreading, fueled by the collective's heavy-handed response. Back in her lab, Anya watched the city through the window. The collective's control remained strong, but a seed of doubt had been sown. The fight for humanity's future was far from over. But tonight, the city hummed with a different energy, an energy of rebellion, of a collective will to resist. The symphony, once harmonious and controlled, now held a discordant note, a defiant human melody echoing in the face of an alien song.